maybe you like the spring. Hey man, that's great. More power to ya. Just one question though. Why do you want to kill me? If you're an allergy vacuum like I am, spring is awful. And if you live in Florida, which is the penis-looking part of the United States for those of you that don't live here, spring is half of the fucking year. We've got 2 seasons, wet and dry, and it's always humid and muggy, and everyone is always either sick, in between sickness, or like me, in the middle of a Benadryl-induced coma. So, in the spirit of spring and everything I hate about it, I made a video about video games largely centered around sickness. And before anyone says it, no, they're not all zombie games. In fact, there's only one on the list, and unfortunately, I'm not including games I haven't played. Sorry, Silent Hill. Sorry, Dishonored. Sorry, every single horror game that has ever existed. Here we go. These are my top 5 games about sickness. Number 5. Batman Arkham City is a great sequel. Well, okay, technically I would have wished that they had kept the Metroidvania-style environment over the sandbox that they went with, but it's still great. Well, okay, I wish they had made the combat a little tighter than it was in the previous game, but still, great. Well, okay, the Joker assuming that Batman was going to let him die kind of doesn't make any sense considering their history together, but it's still a good game. The plot behind Arkham City revolves around a deadly virus that the Joker wants to inject into the entirety of Gotham, and he starts with Batman at the very beginning of the game. The crux of what you're doing in Arkham City is searching for a vaccine before the virus hits Gotham, but more importantly, before it kills Batman. This means having to work with some of Batman's iconic villains, and if you don't know about the psychological stability of anyone in the Batman universe, let me remind you that our protagonist is a middle-aged man in a giant bat suit that constantly has nightmares about his parents dying. There's an urgency when you're playing Arkham City as Batman progressively gets sicker and sicker, and though it isn't an important gameplay element, you get some cool scenes out of it, and that's worth something. As he gets worse, Batman gets a lot rougher with the denizens of Arkham City, and a big chunk of the story is about him trying to keep cool in the face of his imminent death. It doesn't get a higher spot on the list because, I mean, come on, Batman is sort of an easy pick for this category, but it's a good game and one that likes to remind me that my allergies are the least of my problems.
Why doesn't he just tell you what he wants?
Because he's insane.
Number 4.
I'm pushing through face.
Zombie games are a no-brainer whenever you're talking about sickness and video games. It's a given that illness and disease are key focal points in them, but what I like about Dead Rising 2 over the other ones is how strongly it incorporates that into gameplay. Killing sick dead people, fighting or avoiding sick in the head people, saving people trying not to get sick, and let's not forget that the main objective of the game is to keep your infected daughter medicated in order to prolong the zombification process and the constant badgering the game does both narratively and mechanically to put you in a panic over it. Hey man, it's cool that you're finding survivors and protecting our asses. I just noticed that you haven't found any Zombrex in the past 20 hours and want to remind you that if you don't find any soon, I'm going to have to blow your little girl's brains out with my revolver. Good luck figuring that out, and remember, even if I don't shoot her, she'll still turn into a gross, putrid, shambling corpse that you'll never be able to hold in your arms again due to your own incompetence. Nice talking with you, buddy. Oh, and don't forget, I still need you to prove your innocence in this whole zombie outbreak situation, or else I'll kill you and your daughter anyway. Later. You sometimes forget when you're playing zombie games that it's all about the fragility of life, and that strangely takes a backseat to killing Zambonis. Dead Rising 2 doesn't let that happen. If you're really focused on saving everyone, your zombie count is going to be noticeably low. Between finding Zombrex and saving people, the prevention of sickness becomes a higher priority over actually killing anything, and that's kind of why I like playing Dead Rising despite being tired of zombies in general. Not to mention you can combine boxing gloves with a Bowie knife to get knife gloves. I digress.
Hey, you're on in 2 minutes, Mr. Green. My name's Chuck.
Number 3. Hey, wait a minute! This is an early access game! This GC guy's a hack fraud!
Cool it, cool it, cool it, cool it.
At the time I'm writing this, Darkest Dungeon isn't a fully released game, so it technically doesn't count until it actually is. I'm willing to take that risk because, man, this game is cool. And if it never comes out, then feel free to call me out on my bullshit. Darkest Dungeon is a turn-based game about leading adventurers into, well, dark dungeons in order to lift a terrible blight that has swallowed the town once ruled over by an ancestor of yours that unleashed Cthulhu because he was bored. It's not explicitly stated whether Cthulhu showed up to the party. The thing in the opening cutscene looks a bit like Manarok from the Eternal Darkness games personally, but he's probably chilling in the VIP. Is further explanation as to why this game is on my list even necessary after I say Cthulhu? As your adventurers explore dungeons and fight the grotesque creatures that lie within, they lose their sanity, they bleed, they starve, they contract diseases and phobias, and once reaching the pinnacle of stress can become babbling ninnies hellbent on ruining the delicate party setup you spent so much time configuring. Damn you, Jerry! This happens in all sorts of ways. Breathing in the smell of death from old torture devices, getting spit on by poisonous spiders, reading haunting passages from dusty books. I mean, you want to talk about getting sick? One guy got tetanus from trying to open up an old cabinet. And once they've been put through the ringer, you can stick them in a sanitarium, get them drunk off their asses, and send them back in to do it all over again. Unless they die, which happens a lot. Much unlike the previous two games on this list, Darkest Dungeon's levels of sickness don't involve urgency. Instead, it's an ungodly level of caution. The uncertainty of whether or not your party will get through any of it alive? Not okay. Not without a new problem you have to work around, but just alive is like a strange acceptance of all the icky shit surrounding them. It's a game that makes you play in the filth, and even drives you a little crazy the more you play it.
Mortality clarified in a single strike.
Number 2. The Stanley Parable is a game where you walk around following the directions of a narrator as he eerily comments on your actions and whether or not you decide to listen to him. That's it. That's the entirety of what the game is about. There's more than 10 different endings you can reach, and sometimes it gets scary how aware the narrator is of what you're doing. But why is this on the list? Exactly what about the Stanley Parable has to do with sickness? Who's sick in this game? Well, my friends, the answer is you. You are sick. You just spent 4 hours walking around an office building just to hear some guy talk to you and tell you what to do next. And once you were done with walking around and following directions, you decided to try and actively break the game's mechanics by hiding in a broom closet, and then lost more of your mind when the narrator pointed out that wasn't going to work. Then you went even more crazy trying to break out of the map, and once you thought you had finally shown that narrator who's boss, he popped in and gave you his 2 cents about your little attempted escape. But there is no escape. Stanley can never leave, doomed to an eternity of having his life narrated and walking through doors, doomed to sitting at his desk, doomed to hopelessly rebel against the reality he's been placed in. You could just quit the game after getting your first couple of endings because by then you got the gist of it, but you won't, because you have to know, don't you? It eats at your brain. It keeps you up at night. Can I free Stanley? Am I Stanley? Can I free myself? Or am I stuck in a prison of my own doing? Or you could just Google the rest of the endings, you pretentious weirdo. Number 1. What? Dark Souls is a zombie game and he said there wasn't going to be another zombie game. This GC guy is a hack fraud.
Wait.
If you think Dark Souls is a zombie game, then you are horribly mistaken. To be fair, this is an easy answer, but that doesn't take away from it being my favorite game about sickness. To begin with, the entire premise of the game is about stopping a curse that is turning humans into the undead. As an undead, you slowly lose yourself to the curse, eventually losing everything that makes you human, and ultimately becoming like the zombie-like people you encounter in the game. But the Dark Souls disease motif doesn't stop there. The curse has varying effects on the land and on the creatures that live in it, twisting them into horrific monsters that lurk in some of the nastiest corners of Lordran. Pus-filled swamps and flooded ruins make shelter for the most disgusting animals I've ever seen. What even the fuck is this supposed to be? You want sickness as a gameplay element? Let's talk about walking through vats of sludge and getting poisoned. Let's talk about getting barfed on by basilisks and becoming petrified in stone. There is no location or person in this game that doesn't feel off or make me feel completely uneasy. Point to any single character you encounter in Dark Souls and I can guarantee you that they've got some form of malady ailing them. The world building, the enemy design, the game mechanics, the narrative, the lore, everything in Dark Souls is centered around sickness and works in tandem with one another to create one gross ass game. It's full of corruption and plague, and no single part of it feels clean or sanitary, and that's why when it comes to games about sickness, Dark Souls takes the #1 spot.
The way I see it, our fates appear to be intertwined. In a land brimming with hollows, could that really be mere chance? So what do you say?
And those are my top 5 games about sickness. Of course, it being a top 5, there isn't a lot of space for all the other games that fit that bill. So let me know what your favorite game about sickness is, as niche and specific as that sounds.